Welcome back, creeps, to another one of Dr. Lawrence Fugate's venture videos here at Horrid Lore. Let me start off again this week by thanking you, creeps, for your support of these videos. A lot of you have been putting some theories in the comments, and they're very intriguing. Namely the one involving Hank becoming a villain who will ultimately arch Dean to complement the idea that Rusty and Monarch, or Malcolm, are also brothers, venture brothers. And this could be Hank carrying on the family tradition started by his Uncle Malcolm. Who knows? I think it's very cool that all of you guys are putting your theories on here. It gives me a great perspective. It's very exciting that we can all share this together. I'm glad that I started doing this because it's a nice little collective with you creeps that we can all kind of put our heads together on what the fuck is going on, because this is a show that gives us so many little Easter eggs that in the beginning of the season have proved to mean a lot more than we think. Alright, well, let's get into this week's. This week's episode, it didn't really particularly give us any direct links to what I was just talking about in our theories, but we are certainly given a lot to chew over and process this week, regardless. In this newest installment, the Inamorata Consequence begins with the Ventures and Brock riding a jeep through a very familiar country road, which the initiated will remember leads us to the old Venture compound. They're soon ambushed by a group of OSI agents in hazmat suits, who greet Brock with guns, but don't shoot him, so I guess it's kind of cordial. They remove their helmets and reveal that the leader is none other than General Hunter-Gatherers. They have convened at the old home of Jonas Venture for a summit to commemorate the treaty he drew up between the Guild and the OSI so many years ago. So the ruined compound is filled with all of our favorite members of each group, from Shore Leave to Phantom Limb, who, I must add, got a sexy new makeover. If you haven't seen it, you gotta check it out. To one of my favorite unsung characters from the OSI, one Snoopy, as well as the mysterious OSI woman and guild cyborg who fell in love in the last season finale. I don't know if you remember that. They're on the building with sniper rifles across from the new Ventec building, and they play a rather meatier role this time around. So the second summit of the Treaty of Tolerance soon begins with an introductory speech given by Rusty, who is reading pretty much just a retouched version of his father's original speech from the first summit. Hank is in the background, grown impatient and bored, when a masked OSI agent grabs him by the arm and whisks him out of the room. As he's carrying Hank back to the old hangar, it becomes more and more obvious who the mysterious soldier is. And before he even takes the helmet off, Hank, and I'm guessing all of us, are able to figure out that we are finally getting reintroduced to Dermot Fichtel for the first time since Season 5. I don't know about you, but this got me just about as excited as it seemed Hank was. I missed Dermot immensely. While all of this is going on, Dean is wandering through the woods to find old Ben's cabin, who, I don't know if I mentioned this in my recap, but who was the man that created the boys' clones along with Jonas Sr. And he clued Dean in on the fact that he was a clone. But Ben isn't home. He's left his red helper robot behind to mind the house, who is voiced by the always amazing New Zealander Rhys Darby. If you've never seen any of his stuff, then I would definitely recommend searching him up on IMDb. He's a very funny guy. And as opposed to their helper, this one has a full vocabulary. And he shows Dean a quick film on the history of the helper robots, which apparently were invented by Jonas Sr. and were quite popular around the world for a while because they were basically just nannies that you didn't have to pay. You pay one lump sum and you got a nanny forever. Until there was an accident in which a baby was killed, and the helpers were seen, obviously, as monsters, and were all destroyed in one single fell swoop. Forgotten like so many Tamagotchi pets. All except for Ben's and Jonas's, who was one of the prototypes, and not as intelligent as the later models, which explains why he's so kind of primitive and jumpy. Like, Helper is definitely smart in a very innate sense, but I don't know, it's like a Chewbacca deal. Like, you really can't put your finger on exactly what he's thinking, but you can tell that he knows what's going on. Anyway, I digress. Cut back to the summit, where Rusty is doing his best to mediate the myriad disagreements between the Guild and OSI, which seem almost fucking endless. So Phantom Limb and Shore Leave eventually have to settle their dispute through a duel, but a very different kind of duel than you'd be picturing. It was one created by Jonas Sr. at the first summit to settle arguments. The two men would put on scuba flippers on their hands and floaty donuts around their waist, and then they'd have a fucking slap fight. Which probably worked a lot better when the compound had a pool, I'd assume. Cut back to the hangar, where Hank and Dermot are climbing a mountain of clothes and other garbage left behind in the move. As they are talking, Dermot reveals that he was fast-tracked to the OSI by a quote-unquote relative who did him a favor if he never said that they were related, which Dermot quickly covers up so Hank doesn't really follow up on it. So, I mean, I don't know if I said this in the recap either, but just to retouch on it, this means that Dermot must know that his mother was in fact the president of the Rusty Venture fan club and that the two had a relationship when she was a minor, leaving his grandmother to raise him as her own son, and his real biological mother, Nikki, the president of the Rusty Venture fan club, to be played off as his sister to avoid any sort of scandal. Now, I know some people who had to live their lives like this, and it is quite a traumatic life to live. So I'm very happy that old Dermot has finally been cut a break and is beginning to find his way in the world. Back at old Ben's cabin, Dean is showing Red Helper some videos of his helper, asking why the Red Helper is so much more intelligent than he is, to which he responded that Ben had upgraded him to be part human, dropping that Dean is very similar in that sense, but soon tries to cover it up like Dermot did in this last scene, because he thinks that Dean is unaware of the fact that he's a clone. But Dean obviously knows from his last visit with Ben, and Red Helper describes them both as products of immense guilt from great men that allowed them a second chance at life. Something that Dean has never really pondered over. He's kind of just wallowed in this fact that he's a freak! But back at the hangar, the two interagency lovers show up thinking that they are meeting in secret and begin to unfurl a plan to kill everyone at the summit, until Hank pops up dressed like David Cassidy and rides down to them on his magic dragon to stop them, which obviously turns out to be a fantasy. In reality, the two lovers are just getting busy in a pile of the fucking miscellaneous trash in this hangar. And the two young men are watching with binoculars on their taller pile of miscellaneous trash, giving each other a blow-by-blow action as they're sharing the binoculars. Cut back to the summit, where we are getting into another heated argument where Hunter has dropped a Ventureverse slur, calling the guild bad guys, leading to extreme outrage. Seeing as how the term good guy and bad guy are this show's equivalent of racial profiling, this explodes just as much of, if not more, than you'd imagine that it would. Alright, well, back in the woods, Dean is attempting to bring Red Helper back with him, but the new helper can't go through with it. The human programming in his mind has left him shell-shocked and terrified to go out into the real world in fear of persecution. And back at the house, or the cabin, Red Helper bids farewell to Dean, telling him that he has far more of a chance in the real world since he looks normal on the outside. He's not a pariah like he is since he's a helper robot. Giving Dean a very new frame of mind on what it means to be a clone, that he's pretty fucking lucky. But before this is fully able to sink in, Red Helper bids farewell, but does not say farewell Dean. He says farewell Rusty. So maybe Hank and Dean aren't the only Venture clones after all. Maybe the clones were just a ploy to keep Jonas Venture alive forever, and it just stopped working after the Gargantua 1 disaster when he died. Who knows, because he was clearly very interested in keeping himself alive, and I think the clones... I don't know, maybe I just watched Hereditary too recently, and I'm thinking too much about soul swaps, and this is all out of nowhere, but... let me know in the comments. Like I said, I'm very excited to see what you guys think of all these little pieces we're getting. Alright, cut back to the summit where the childish squabbling is still ensuing to an even more juvenile point than ever, until Rusty finally loses all patience and admits that he understands why his father treated them like children at the original summit. Because they were nothing but a bunch of bickering babies. And being a bad father to them was the only way he knew how to react. Because he was such a fucking subpar dad. And as we see, maybe Rusty is a little bit more of a well-rounded and developed and understanding as a parent, even though he's clearly not a perfect dad, as we've seen through these past 6.5 seasons. Speaking of fairness, like the Tooth Fairy, something only children believe in. Once you're an adult, you realize that fairness is bullshit. And this puts things into extreme perspective, and finally gets both sides to the point where they realize that re-signing the treaty is the only reasonable outcome that they can have. Alright, now we gotta trace back to the Romeo and Juliet-esque romance culminating in the hangar, which I know I kind of fucking cut out there, but I wanted to put it all together here with what we got in the final after-credits scene. Because the OSI female is heard outraged finding PP on the cybernetic guild agent's belt, and we obviously assume she's referring to piss on his belt and is grossed out. But in the end, in this after-credits scene, the astute Dr. Girlfriend puts 2 and 2 together. realizing that his belt has the literal initials PP on it, meaning that he is part of the Peril Partnership. The Guild has a fox in the henhouse. And I, for one, cannot wait to see how this turns out. Again, I am very, very excited for next Sunday to roll around, and I cannot wait to share it with you creeps. And I hope you're just excited. And I hope you're just excited for tomorrow, because my new podcast is going to be coming out, where I'm going to be discussing a very horrible movie that you shouldn't be seeing, and a movie that everybody thinks is very horrible. And the main topic is going to be puppets. So take a wild guess what it's going to be about. Until then, love you creeps. Doc out.